You start going. There we go. So despite me being a boomer, I was able to set up our Zoom meeting, and I have with me Jcrypto, who has hosted myself and several other DAOs and a bunch of incredible Cardano CNFT projects and protocols on his channel. We had this thought. I was talking to Nemo and a couple other people in creating videos myself in the past and wanting to educate individuals like we've talked about. No one really interviews the interviewer to a further extent. And I think that genuine education, not shilling projects, but wanting to fill in the blanks of why these things are valuable, what they mean, and also admitting that you're learning along the way and that you're not just a process expert or some high-level developer. I think that that type of transparency and honesty in those educational videos is few and far between. And if we can go through this interview, you can talk about your journey and we can go back and forth to see some of the things that you faced, some of the things that you overcame, and also your outlooks and perspectives. It can enable others that are passionate about this, but just aren't confident enough to make that leap, to be able to go and start to create content, or at least become like a speaker student in a way. Like those conversations still mean something. So I appreciate you for being on.
Dude, Viva, thank you so much for having me on, man. I'm so excited for this. That's a really, so is that kind of where to kind of start, just my general journey? Because I definitely have some thoughts on that from what you just said that would be interesting.
So, well, the first question I had, and I think that it highlights some of this, you've made probably, and I watched a recent one, it was probably two weeks ago or so. I know you crossed the 500 video mark. You probably made about 530 videos, give or take. I think probably even more. How many times have you been interviewed as just an interviewee and talking about your journey or how you view things directly?
Probably 3 to 4 times, but every single time it's been so different, man, because there's different layers to every person. You know what I mean? So like, I think you get a little bit of different layers, whether it's just how I view the space, you know, what I did before I got into crypto, what kind of I see going forward as my career evolves. So there's different layers that come out whenever somebody gets interviewed, which is something that I've learned too, which is why I love having repeat guests as well, because you get different takes.
So then where we'll start off then in this interview inception, as I like to call it, I want you to go into just your original origin. So you're not making videos yet, and there had to be a light bulb moment where you decided this makes sense to me for a certain amount of reasons, not only to create content, but the concept of the value behind what we're talking about. Tell me about that, and everyone should be able to learn a little bit more about why we see you all over our timeline talking about this stuff.
So something that I've never mentioned before, which will be fun, is I've always watched podcasts, or I guess I can't watch a podcast, but listen to podcasts, from Lewis Howes to Jay Shetty to Logan Paul to Gary Vaynerchuk, whether it be pop culture, self-improvement, even, you know, Jay Shetty does the monk stuff. I actually have a picture on my phone where I met Jay Shetty and I was standing next to him. I didn't even know who he was from a conference once, which is funny because he has the top mental health podcast in the world, which was insane once I found out who he was. But yeah, man. So I've listened to thousands of interviews. I've listened to thousands of podcasts. And there was something, I guess, looking back that, yeah, there was a little bit of a personality I figured I could add to something. I didn't think it would be crypto. You know, I did tons of different entrepreneurial ventures where I would talk on my camera about whether it be working out, athletics, used to be a hockey player, real estate, did a lot of stuff there. Interviewing local businesses. I started my first YouTube channel was with a buddy where we just interviewed a few local businesses. We didn't know what would happen, but I think all that kind of was practice for where I found kind of interest or where the puck was going for tech, which was, you know, the blockchain. And the light bulb moment was actually me feeling like I missed out on Web 2 social media. I'm 23 years old. I was really young. I wasn't paying attention. I was the most anti-social media guy you could find in high school. I was like, this is pointless. This is a waste of my life. I'd rather be in the real world. I'd rather be outside, going on my bike, whatever, playing hockey, working out. And then it was around the end of my hockey career when I was playing juniors that I started listening to Gary Vee and some other entrepreneurs. And I was like, huh, this is kind of like a game. My body's deteriorating. Business looks like a game that I could actually invest the next 10, 20 years of my life into. Then, I got into business. I come from a business family. My dad has a small business. My grandfather on my mom's side also was an entrepreneur that made lollipops on the East Coast, funny enough. So it's in my DNA. So that's where I was like, okay, I missed out on Web 2. I'm working with my dad's company. He's not into social media, so I can't experiment there. Real estate gave me an outlet to kind of test if I was good at certain skills or develop certain skills too, like sales, cold calling. All my listings were expired listings. My first year real estate, which is the hardest kind of listing to get. And it's also the best place to start because you go through so many people that don't want to sell, whatever. And I actually helped some people out sell their house, which was great. There were definitely some people that needed to sell that didn't want to. That's a little bit tougher, but you're there to help them ultimately. And all the meanwhile, still keeping my eyes on blockchain pretty much since 2016. I was like, okay, what's the next big thing? I missed out on social media. What's this blockchain thing? What's this Bitcoin thing? I read my first blockchain book in 2016, saw Bitcoin, go crazy. I was like, okay, that's blockchain. Because I got into the blockchain book before even I saw Bitcoin appreciate in price, because you saw certain tech articles. I had a book about it, whatnot. And it was a very natural transition, to be honest with you, because this is where the puck is going. We're seeing this disrupt so many industries right now, and most people don't even know about it. And yeah, that was kind of the light bulb moment transition.
Well, a couple things. One, it's funny to see that we have a lot in common, even though I'm older. I'm in my early 30s now, but if you feel like you missed Web 2, I missed Web 2, and I was a part of it. Every single class that I could have took in high school, any type of early programming or developing. Like I remember when they first brought computers in, I was in like 5th grade and they were teaching people how to type. It was like that perfect middle ground between remembering what it was like not having the internet and not being interconnected and having to connect to people naturally, but not enough know-how or desire to get into it to see where things were moving in the future. Myself, I was never, at least in my younger years, I didn't have the foundation, the education, or the stability to really do anything in business. A lot of it was just trying to keep my head above water. But where I did find a lot of similarities in that story you just told me, one, listening to content or consuming it from elsewhere. So I'm sure that you mentioned a ton of different people that do different things, and whether it is for health and wellness, whether it is in education, whether it's in business, whether it's in finance, I am almost addicted to consuming content or learning things. And I learned after the fact it's because partially I have severe ADHD. So I didn't know that. Oh, well, see, there we go. So I didn't know that at the time. And once I did find out, I didn't have the means to get medicated for it. I couldn't do anything. So the only thing that could take my mind off of it racing was to put it somewhere where it had to keep up. And it almost kind of like lock and step. I was able to move with it. And then at the same time, I found my passion in athletics, even though I didn't play hockey or I wasn't even athletic for the first 18 years of my life. I did play football, and I wound up losing about 110 pounds after high school, got really into training and decided to go to college because I wasn't going to go at all. It just, I couldn't focus and it wasn't for me. But I wound up after a couple years and a bachelor's degree later working in professional collegiate strength and conditioning with different teams. So that was a leap and a bound away from being the most overweight, out of shape person. But that exercise in adrenaline and endorphins, just like consuming education at a fast pace, allowed me to focus. And then through a series of unfortunate events and injuries, and mostly injuries, I saw that that was unsustainable. And I spent enough times doing enough different things that I was like, I want to move into business, not because I'm a business person, but because I've consumed so much information that it's starting to intuitively make sense to me. And you start to pick up on things and walk into a room and you can talk to people, and your degree might not be in it and your expertise doesn't align with it. And you might not be able to functionally do some things, but you can understand it and sometimes even find a better way to do it. So eventually I found my way into this space around the same time as you, around 2016, did my first investing around 2017, and then have just been, fighting the good fight ever since. But hearing your background, and then you even saying like you have ADHD, you consume all this content, at a certain point, when you bring all that to the forefront of your focus and you see that, okay, all of these other things are fine, but here's this one thing that seems to be a continuous solution to multiple other things. And also any other job that I could do or any other focus, I'm not working for myself. The end point is I have 40 years of trying to accumulate enough to take care of myself working for someone else. There has to be a better way or a brighter solution, or maybe a way to rebalance those different things. And it carries over in your videos. Even before you told me that story, I could have at least somewhat guessed. I sent you that message on Twitter last night. I was like, I knew it. Like, I forget what you told me, but I was like, yep.
I'll tell that story in a minute. Yeah.
I was like, I knew that we had whatever that was in common, because in order to get started in this, there has to be something outside of, I want to do this for followers, or I want to do this to get paid. It has to come from a passion standpoint that somehow can outweigh either the doubt you might have or the doubt that others have in you, to just plug in and do it.
It's really funny. There's a couple of notes that I wrote down here too, because like, there's one thing I wanted to say for the audience that is watching and maybe wants to start doing content creation that I just don't want to forget. So I'll say it real quick. Back to Viva's point, everyone that's creating content right now in the crypto and Web3 space, if they tell you that they're an expert in anything, they're completely lying. Because, and I really believe that, because it's impossible. What's great about the space and why there's so much opportunity for content creation is there's a little bit of an interesting dynamic going on where we're innovating so quickly that even if you are just like, you've been in this game for 3 to 5 years, there's something that will come out tomorrow that you just haven't seen before, and that you'll have to take anywhere from 3 hours to a week to learn. And if you don't learn for 3 hours to a week, you won't be able to talk about it in an educated way. And there's these macro crypto YouTube channels that don't go deep enough to touch those things too, and really educate people on them. So there's an infinite amount of opportunity from all of the innovations, just being able to update people, educate people on certain things, white paper reads I've talked about. The other thing I just wanted to say too is it's really funny that you say that, because we hear Gary Vee and he's like, these 20-year-olds that say they're, a real estate investor expert, and now they're the crypto expert. And I'm like listening, I'm like, oh God, I must like come off that way, but I'm not an expert at any of these things. I think I have enough confidence from certain investments that I've made to qualify myself as an investor and not a business person or an operator. I've done enough operational and business things where I've gotten enough self-awareness out of that to say, right now at this point in my life, I've had more wins from investing. I've had a huge win from AMD, from researching Lisa Su when she took over that company as the CEO, when that was trading at, I don't even know, like $18, and it's probably at like 100 now. I invested wicked early into that. Nobody was talking about it at the time. And just that at an early age of 19 or 18 was such a confidence boost for me. Another thing, so I think part of it's self-awareness too, like where you want to position yourself as a content creator, because some of the me doing investments I'm interested in that might actually be profitable. I'm trying to educate people. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but some of those things have been correct. And it's not because I am starting that project or I own it. It's because I see something in it that actually has huge potential and I just talk about it, and then boom, it's successful. And chances are, if I'm talking about it, I might be invested in it because I believe in it. So there's like the home runs that I've had that have given me that kind of confidence to step into this space and try to, create content of projects I believe in. But by no means am I an expert, because there's still so much that even if you're a great fundamental investor where you're looking at what the utility is, what the trend is, what's all kind of going into this one project, where it is in the space, what blockchain is it on? Is it DeFi, just a CNFT? What kind of CNFT is it? A DAO? Even if you're a great fundamental investor, there is truth in this other side of it where there's tons of inflows of capital, there's whales, there's market manipulation that happens that you just can't predict. So you just really don't know for certain anything. And that's the beautiful part about it, because it's kind of a little bit of a, yeah, you win when you're right, you feel great. And when you lose, it's your loss and it's on you, and you got to be accountable for that. And I always say that it's the healthiest mindset to have.
And that's exactly why I respect you to the level that I do, and why I wanted to come onto your show and then bring you on here, because ultimately that ability to admit what you don't know is a superpower in and of itself. And a lot of the people that wind up getting chopped up in trading or using leverage or trying to throw everything they have into the markets assume, oh, I know what I'm doing based on just a past precedent or based on what someone else told me because they made a lot of money. But most markets are pretty efficient in the sense of the people that have money are good at making money because they decide where it goes. If it was easy to make money in this market, whether in crypto or NFTs, we would all be rich and retired. In fact, it's the opposite. The majority of people wind up losing everything because it plays into your psychology. It plays into your desperation. It plays into your patience. It plays into every single thing that will wear you thin, confuse you, frustrate you. And the good thing is, if you diversify correctly and you don't go all in on any one thing, all you need is maybe one or two out of 10 things to do really well, and you'll still be well ahead of where you started, with how a lot of things happened in crypto.
Dude, you know what I've been thinking about recently, Viva? I think about like time frames too. I think like this might be true, but if you're, sometimes people are just better at certain time frames. Like for me, I've noticed that when I'm able to hang on to something for 3 years, it tends to be better based on how I look at projects, because I'm more of a long-term kind of viewer. Like AMD is a perfect example of that. I also bought sports cards that took 3 to 4 years to mature. Luka Doncic, Panini Prism 2018. Mosaics was a great set, but not many people saw it at the time. And I bought a wholesale pack, so I spent $1,200, and I had a few great pulls from that, but I didn't sell them. I just sat on them. They didn't do anything for 2 to 3 years, and then boom, when all of a sudden you hear Gary Vee starting to talk about sports cards, and then Luka Doncic PSA 10 base rookie cards were trading at $50. And then boom, they went up to 1,400. And I'm still sitting on a few, as well as Trae Young rookie cards. And I had a LeBron and a gold LeBron, which is a 1 of 10 in that set, and then a gold Luka that I sold the Luka for $26K after tax, which is insane because I had never made that much money like before, because I wasn't like an early crypto millionaire guy. But it's just like there's this time frame thing. Do you think that what have your successes as an investor? Because I'm interested, like truthfully, man, I'm just like I really love investing. I think it's such a cool thing that you can put money to work in a market, take almost like a bet, but an educated bet. I don't gamble. I don't like gambling. I hate losing money. So I say I don't like gambling, but basically, because the house always votes. But with investing, you could take an educated bet, and it's like your money will work for you if you're end up being correct on that thesis. And yes, you can diversify, you can hedge, you can pick different different genres of things too. So if you're into crypto, there's so many different sectors that you can get in on that can all have different cycles. Are you an investor are you an investor first and foremost, do you think? Or are you kind of like and then what kind of time frame are you as an investor, have you noticed?
I like that question. One, I got to throw out a side note.
I'm an interviewer. You're interviewing me. Now I'm throwing a question.
No, no,
I
this
just
is
love
exactly, I told you it's interview inception. I just want to throw out one of my childhood best friends. His favorite team was the Mavericks. So I've been a big Dirk fan, big Mark Cuban fan, minus his stuff outside of crypto. Just always loved Dallas. So when Luka came on, that was a good call. I was like,
oh, man.
this kid he's going to be Dirk version 2.
I like Trae Young better. I'm just gonna say it. I'm sorry.
I don't dislike Trae Young.
Luka made me more money. I like Trae Young better because I'm a skill guy. Well, Luka has the skills, but it's just different, you know. Trae's flashy, man.
Just my stubborn allegiance, I would say. But as far as stubbornness goes, maybe not stubbornness, but just in the eye of investing, I am an investor. I am not a trader. I am not a flipper. I think a lot of it, yeah, and I think a lot of it
are good at trading, by the way. I would argue that I'm almost okay at trading, but I'm 100 times better at investing.
And I think that we could both probably throw our hats in the ring and become mediocre traders just because we consume enough content and talk about enough stuff that whether it is in our space or in the macroeconomic environment, we can anticipate certain things or what people are going to do. And then ultimately we know where things should wind up, barring any chaotic thing. Because of course, like what we're talking about here, I always used to say on my old channel, like, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an oracle. I'm not a wizard. I can't tell anyone what's going to happen. For myself, when I make decisions, I have an incredibly high propensity to absorb risk. I think it just comes from,
yes, me too.
You know, like for me,
hates it. My wife hates it.
Like in never having anything throughout my life and always being in this place of having nothing to lose and just trying to make it to the next day. I've never had this idea of like, oh, I have all this stuff that I can't lose. So everything now is just icing on the cake that can give me the ability to help others and to give back. Like I firmly, like, I don't want anything. And the whole reason I'm in the space, people are like, are you here for the money or the tech? And I'm like, I'm here for the people. If that is vicariously through the tech because it helps them, or if it is through the money because I can help support them or support myself and then help people, then so be it. But I'm here for the people and everything that enables that, whether it is gains that you make or the technology that allows it. Those are all just mechanisms that get us from point A to point B. As far as investment goes, like there were times even in the traditional markets where I was one of those weirdos that was in Tesla way early in 2020, just because everyone's talking about their profit and loss or their overall, like, oh, how do you see them like making X amount of money? I'm like, you have to look at potential because you're hitting a point where I work at a company without saying their name or going into any of the other shit where it is just customer service or sales and it's like implementation and all these different things. And you look at the vast overvaluation of everything around us through multiple different reasons why we get there. None of us are really providing services to each other. We're just all sitting there answering calls, pretending that we can fix the problems that are broader than what we have the ability to handle. And then we just all pay each other for existing. We're not really providing any value to these things. And you can only have so many CRM services. You can only have so many, web design pages. You can only have like so many things that do the exact same thing, that when then you have a couple clear winners that absorb $1 trillion market caps like Amazon, where they're scaring their employees out of unionizing, or you have a company like Apple that essentially owns pretty much all of tech and is just leveraging people that are trying to fix their own equipment or develop their own applications. As they pin down those markets, there's not a lot of a direction to go. So I would bet on potential and solutions over any safe bet that a typical financial advisor would say put their money into. And like a decision I didn't make right before I stopped working with them, one of my friends who is a licensed financial advisor, I was telling them about Piedmont Lithium, but they're a lithium company on the East Coast in the United States. And at the time they were like $6 a share. And I think right now they were like 72, 75, something like that. But I was like, we're going to have to cut the supply chain and bring that lithium in. If we have the ability to source it from here, and we're going to have all these macroeconomic hardships ahead, and I mean, this is right in the middle of the pandemic too, so you have all this crazy stuff going on. I think that that'd be a good bet. And of course, 10, 12x later, I'm the idiot that didn't do it based on, oh, it's just they don't have funding.
You want to talk about losses, man? So part of that, so my problem too is I'm such an innovation bug. Like,
yeah.
And what I've learned through crypto, and this is an important lesson that I've learned. This is like the biggest lesson, and it's made me much more conservative. So that's why I'm hovering. Okay, what's going to potentially be the top metaverses on Cardano? Not like I'm not looking for the tail end. I'm looking for like the top 3. And the reason is because right now Cardano, you got such an underpriced, like even the top projects, whether we're talking about DEXs, DAOs, just CNFTs, even, the top 10K collection on Cardano. If Cardano is a grand slam, I mean, 5,999 ADA for a space, but it's insane. So like, if I think that the risk versus reward ratio for top anything right now on Cardano is so big, because part of the money that I received, I put into an early DAO, and I bought these NFTs that were supposed to be this like glorious staking. You get rewards from their DEX, you get rewards from all these other lending protocol, and they were going to do a gambling site, and I lost it all of it. So like, because it was the first time I've ever seen NFT staking, and I think it was the first NFT staking, it was wicked early. It was like back in probably April or May of 2021. So it was pretty early for NFTs in general, and NFT staking. And I remember, just because it was the first DAO, it had an algorithmic stable coin. I was like trying to wrap my head around. So I think part of it too is like, there's certain times where you want to have skin in the game to learn, because I learned so much about DAOs. I learned so much about lending models. When you're invested into a project, you do your research because there's money on the line, right? So it went down. I learned a ton from it. But I think that there's a thing being too early to stuff, right?
Oh,
that's like another thing.
And that actually will bring me into a point I'm going to bring up, just about how other people.
I should, dude, Viva, let me say this, man. I might not be 100 times better at investing, but I certainly love it 100 times more than flipping. I should say it like that.
No, I would agree. One, flipping is just, I already wear away probably a whole layer of stomach lining every day, just with how stressful things are, even when you're controlling all of your controllables. And even if you're not moving everything, and like you could say, if you do all your research, and even in small amounts, because you never want to go all in on any one thing, even if you put $100 in 10 different things and you do your research and you're early enough, 8 of those can fail and you lose $800, 2 of them succeed and you make thousands. So it's just inching forward like that. And there are plenty of people that you could speak to. And I've asked this question to people before, sometimes just in our DMs or talking to people.
Nemo is smart, huh? I've had a Discord conversation with him about this kind of topic. Yep. He's good.
He might be a wizard. I don't know. He's either a wizard or a cyborg or a machine. The guy's incredible.
He's got because he was early to Cardano NFTs too. So I think he's got like I think he's got a good mindset when it comes to NFT investing. And like, if he really wanted to, he could just do that, because
Well, yeah. And I think that's where it comes down to his story and a lot of his stuff. It's very similar to mine in a way, and obviously different in like the details. But when you try and create something that can bring value to other people, Neither myself or him, minus the NFTs that we hold. Like I gave a couple of like the phase one skulls away. I haven't sold anything, and I put my money into liquidity pools for the skull token, which is down currently because we haven't set up our functionality and stuff like that. He's paying the artists preemptively and taking care of them to make sure that we produce everything. At no point are we here like raking in like all this Cardano, like everything that
No,
we
you guys
made.
are building a company. Like,
Yeah,
well, I would, yeah, because like that's why I don't want to do that, right? That's why I didn't do an NFT project. I had a buddy that I was gonna do one with who's a professional football player. I won't say his name, but we decided not to because he needed to focus on his career. And I was like, dude, this is gonna be so much work for me and you. Let's not do this. You make it. You'll be able to hire people if you want to do this. I'll stick to what I'm doing with education and content, because like the one thing I respect about what you guys are doing is you're taking the other side of this whole bet, which is, hey, let's start building in this space. Let's create a ton of value for this ecosystem, because if this ecosystem appreciates, we're going to have a strong community, and we're going to have a strong force and presence in this space that will drive ultimately value back to, all of our holders.
exactly. And I think that part of that comes down to when you mentioned being too early at certain points. Like I would consider Nemo, and I'm sure when he watches this, he's going to roll his eyes at me. I would consider him a visionary in how he structures things. There have been plenty of ideas that he has had or things to come that it's the first time I'm seeing them structured that way. And I think a lot of the times, like I never want to be contentious with other people that I agree with what they're building or I think it needs to be there. Like when we're on with ADAO and we're talking, I understand technology and trustless protocols are the exact reason why this space exists to begin with. But when it comes to things outside of your protocols or treasuries that aren't just web applications, but you actually have members with faces and NFTs that drive that market and build that value, you could have 1,000 proposals coming in every single day. If there's no one that cares, no one that votes on them, or if you tie up everyone's money in an investment and then hit a 6-month NFT like tiny bear market, it doesn't matter what you say or what you promise. You're going to leave a lot of people being frustrated in a space that when that light bulb moment came off and you're like, wow, like look at all this stuff running, I want to get into this. If you're tied up, I don't care if you're tied up in a DAO that spent all of your Cardano on blue chips that are moving quicker and you're watching other things do well, all the way to this breaking story about how Ethereum 2.0 was delayed again. I'm not one to sit here and pick apart stuff and make it personal. I'm saying if I was an investor, especially this big capital that went into Ethereum based on recommendations from everyone else in DeFi, if all my funds were then locked up in 2.0 staking, I couldn't pull it. It was delayed and the market might go through another little bear cycle. I'm losing my mind at that point because they have hundreds of millions of dollars in there. So when it comes to building value, if you and your buddy wound up making a project, it could be good art. It could have a good concept, but it doesn't matter if there aren't X amount of people that hold it that actually are driving that vision or purpose. And that's what I tried to say on the last hour.
That's where like the work comes from, I think, for a lot of projects. And I honestly would argue that 99% of the projects out here just won't have the stomach for staying around another 10 years. Because when me and my buddy were talking, we were like, dude, if we do this, it has to be for the rest of our life. Like we're giving value back constantly. And we couldn't commit to that because we just knew we have so much potential because we're so young to do things just without having to launch a project and make a ton of money that way. So instead, I'm just going to hold my breath, keep creating content, not sell a NFT project that I'm responsible for, and just kind of have fun, because I want to have a happy life, right? Yeah. And you have to give value. Like NFT projects need to continue to give that value and put value into, or at least the community that's part of it too. And then they need to be rewarded for doing that, right? So it's kind of like a little bit of a ongoing process.
So you kind of tied in that idea of, am I an investor? Am I a long-term individual? I have no intention of shifting back to Web 2 or traditional careers or doing anything else. And although I'm like, I just went through a job interview and I'm changing my position where I work currently, it is just to create some type of balance so I can put the focus that I need to here without completely blowing my life up at the moment. And although I'm sure we've all had in the back of our minds, anyone that has done well here over time, there's that little voice that says, well, you could leave. Technically, if you want to, you could just pull the plug and then throw your chips in here. But every month that goes by, every time you got to pay health insurance out of one of your positions, every time you got to pay rent, if the whole market nukes and we go into a little bear cycle up until 2024, then you put yourself in a place where you're going to piecemeal away all the work that you've done up to this point just to get by, where if you can work a little bit harder or struggle a little bit in the short term, it's all going to click all at once. It's just a matter of getting there and outlasting the market. And that success over time, whether it is a very simple example of when they talk about wallets in profit that have held Bitcoin for 4 years or more, all of them, 100% of wallets that have held Bitcoin for 4 years or more are in profit unless they lost it all leverage trading. Just holding it in, that mantra of HODL. But also when you look at, the project and creating value, every Discord that I'm in, I jump in sometimes, even projects that I'm not invested in. I want to see how people are speaking to each other, what is expected of the community of the projects at different stages after launch or after an update. Are they going to put out a season 2 and just dilute their supply by trying to make more money or drive more hype? Are they going to maybe pivot to drive value to the community? And you have a collective of 99.9% of people saying, hey, you're the one that has to provide value to me, where what Nemo has done from the start, his bit by bit, one person by one person, because all of those were individual relationships from that first OG skull drop that he did. They were all people that knew him and trusted him. He said, I'm going to help you build value for yourself. And by shifting that narrative of you're responsible because you made the project, you give me profits or ROI, it is impossible. There are companies, could you imagine like a company with 10,000 employees? That is like a Russell 3000 company. They have teams, they have fleets of employees and board members and investors and strategists and communicators. To take a couple, even a handful of people and say, this handful of people are just going to drive value in perpetuity for everyone else, it's exhausting and it's unsustainable. So instead, you provide avenues for people to create value for themselves. You provide them opportunities to have additional investments or interworkings within our ecosystem to build value themselves. You build them up in what they want to create if they are artists and they're newer, don't have funding. You try and support them if they have a different business background or if they have a special skill set. All of those things have nothing to do with collecting money to invest as a collective. It has to do with building people up individually. And then by extension, that teaches everyone what the purpose of our group is. Yes. So when those proposals come out, that's people know how to vote because they know what the mission is.
So for people that haven't checked out Pneumonium, the one thing I'll say though is like, Viva, that's so rare. I mean, what Pneumonium is doing is a whole new blueprint to this stuff. And the current blueprint just isn't that, right? It's literally, hey, here's our collection. Okay. Essentially, every investor now has equity in that collection. If they do another drop, that equity gets split almost, right? It's like they split the equity that they had and when they do a second sale, unless they buy that next piece of equity. So they almost have to buy back their full equity in the project whenever that supply is inflating. And when I say that, I think 99% of projects don't have the stomach to be in this for 10 years. I mean it because they're not creating a sustainable model. Pneumonium is creating a very sustainable model, but it's rare. It's not everyone's thinking this way. And you're right. That's why Nemo and you, Viva, are kind of visionaries in this space, because you're thinking, okay, how can we do this? Well, you might say that because you're, self-deprecating, but I mean, come on, a guy with that kind of beard, gotta have something special about
No,
him.
I appreciate
But but it's just a new model, I think, and it's going to take time for other projects to look at that model and see how it does over time. I think it's a really healthy thing that you guys are kind of introducing to the space, because 99% of projects are operating on the old, traditional 10K collection model, where they need to drop another mint and then another mint. And then what you got, everyone's equity just keeps getting sliced in half in terms of being part of that, group. Because when you have an NFT, the beautiful part about NFT projects, though, is it's kind of like you market that NFT for the project. So you talked about how big a company is when they have 10,000 employees. Well, essentially, when you give 10,000 people an NFT, they all kind of become a little bit like advertisers and employees for you. So whenever you sacrifice that value, whenever you don't continue to drive value back to them, you're actually decreasing their total equity into that one organization or brand. And I don't think people recognize that, because it's Web3 and it's just a different format, and it's unsustainable. Because if you only can keep inflating the supply, if you can only keep slicing people's equity into the original project, then there's no sustainability for the community to say, okay, I'm basically getting $1, it's being devalued because more are being printed. And why would I keep going? Why would I keep working for this if there's no way to retain that original equity in any way, shape, or form? You know what I mean? So it's just most models just aren't what you guys are doing. But you're trying to introduce sustainability into the ecosystem. Huge props.
Well, thank you. And that's why, like, I am invested in a lot of different projects, and I own hundreds of different NFTs and CNFTs predominantly. But at no point had I ever really worked with one or put my name to something. And before Pneumonium even really got up and running and their Twitter page was just created and Nemo was collecting his team and trying to do things, I didn't even have to think about it. It just clicked to me. And I was like, when we talk about the value of NFTs, we don't talk about the value of the JPEG or even the other additional rewards that come out of it, which is nice, but that is just investing. If you just want ROI, there are enough different cryptocurrencies that you can invest in. There's a social aspect to all of this that goes into it. And even if it's very artsy art or very non-traditional PFP stuff that people respect a little bit more from a collector standpoint in an artist's mind, like I know Unsigned Algorithms always come up as being a very art-driven project. And actually behind my video, I can see them on my timeline right now. People like that as art. But that community of people that appreciate that give it value. It isn't just one person saying that's art to me and therefore it is art now. So if this is going to be essentially finding the value of social value, finding the value of our online identities and what we contribute to different things, it goes beyond just having that PFP, because everyone can be sharing it and they can be ambassadors for it. But ultimately, if I'm coming in today as one of the 7.9 billion people on the planet that have never heard of an NFT, I'm not going to say, here's this very expensive thing that I can take all of my worldly savings and buy, and I'll have this one expensive thing. Like, you either want, like, if you have a network of people that are willing to, let's say, have weekly educational seminars, teach you how to do different things, provide you with different resources, create opportunities for you to come in and maybe have a voice or ask questions, or create something yourself if you're coming from a certain type of expertise. All of those different things are more important than just holding expensive assets. Art in the traditional sense has been available for a very long time and it's very expensive and it has appreciated well. But no one, aside from that same sponsored shill post that I keep seeing from Masterworks about fractionalizing old art, no one's really focused on that. Everyone's talking about NFTs and CNFTs because it changes, again, how we operate socially and organizationally. And there's so many things that you can do with it. but it has to incorporate that social part. It cannot, the trustless system, the focus on integrity, transparency, immutability, okay. Without the social aspect, go invest in crypto, because at the end of the day, NFTs are social, whether people acknowledge that or not to some extent. Even if it has to do with the psychology of people buying into projects. And like some of my favorite things that I'm in heavily, like I'm a massive Goat Tribe fan personally. Like that's one that I bought it, I minted, I bought heavy, I still buy them. Like I love a lot of the people that I met through that project, but from Hobbs and Drew and George and all the guys that built out Secret Goat Society, which I think they had like a little portion where people were upset because they wanted to like buy or mint something, and there was like a voting thing that didn't go the way of a couple people, but they understand this is a long-term play. They had a breakdown in their white paper that had the next 10 years essentially somewhat outlined of how exactly the ownership of that DAO and the voting protocols went. And that is a more investor-oriented mindset. And a lot of those people,
So much more. And Cornucopias, did you see that Cornucopias just released up to 2025 roadmap?
I'm not surprised. I haven't read it yet, but
isn't that interesting that like, I mean, I think some projects, if it wasn't Go Tribe and Cornucopias, I'm not gonna lie, Viva, I'd be a little suspicious. I'd be like, okay, we'll see if you're around in 10 years. But I feel like them, I actually am like, yeah, I could see that.
well, I mean, the truth is you still have to get to 2025, because the metaverse and the way that people imagine it is going to be isn't going to be this year, and it isn't going to be next year.
What do you think about the metaverse, actually?
I think that,
are you because I haven't heard you talk too much about it. So are you like where are you at? Because I'm pretty practical. I think people label me as the metaverse, guy on Cardano, but I am very practical when it comes to this stuff. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts.
So I try and remain practical. I think that unlike the majority of other projects, I've sold different metaverse pieces and I bought different ones, and I'll interchange them. I like to diversify a little bit and have some of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the metaverse, when you talk about the concept of a buzzword, it is not very clear where we're going to get from point A to point B. Everyone sees, they imagine Ready Player One is the metaverse. And that's a lot of people's idea. Oh, well, I'm just going to jump into this virtual world and we're all going to run around and have interconnectivity with all these different things. Will that eventually happen? Sure. I mean, we might solve nuclear fission in 20 years. I can't say, but ultimately it's going to take time to develop. And it's not just from a development standpoint, because there are the smartest people in the world working on a lot of this stuff. Where I think the metaverse is going to run into more issues is from a regulatory standpoint. I also steer clear of talking about like regulatory aspects. And again, none of this is financial advice, but I think that no one necessarily knows how the chips are going to fall there. So anyone speculating like once we get regulation for this or that, or this will be clear and everything will be fine. One, nobody knows. And two, in my personal opinion, not the opinion of Pneumonium or anyone else, in my personal opinion, I believe that any law that will be written, at least by major governments that have something to lose by us actually taking our futures into our own hands and creating a decentralized economy, they're not going to be in the favor of us at all. It's going to be in order to say, hey, like we missed the boat, but I mean, we control everything. So let's try and get some of that back in one way or another, or stop it, or at least like.
You want to hear a hot take, Viva? I think regulations are going to be steered more by major companies than people realize. And I think that a lot of major companies and celebrities are starting to invest in this stuff, which gives kind of some overhead protection.
So you're right. And I wouldn't even say that's a hot take. I'd say that's a very realistic outlook of where we're going, because a lot of the decisions that we make in politics anyway, it is funded and lobbied by massive billion and trillionaire based companies. So a lot of those people pull the levers. And like I guess my hot take would be when Elon came out real big on
Dude, what do you think about that? That's actually sick. by the way.
So
Wait, are you an Elon guy? Or are you, no, you invested in Tesla at like 2000, whatever?
so I invest in potential. I think that for him, it's a difficult road to walk, and I'll kind of tackle it in 3 points.
Yeah. He's going to get
So
attacked by,
like the first point would be last year when he came out, big Bitcoin advocate, bought a bunch, and then we still haven't really went through that floor around where he bought. That tends to be this level of support that we've been at, where he originally bought in early last year. So that's when a lot of other companies joined, companies like MicroStrategy, to purchase it. And I know that he hates the SEC because they tried to bury Tesla all the way back when they said they didn't have funding. And he actually did a TED talk about buying Twitter just changing like his CFO's name to Master of Coin on their filings and stuff. I think that the amount of government regulation that isn't for the good of individual private companies, public companies, or the individuals that either purchase their stuff or work there, I think he's fed up with it, and he's starting to really rattle the cages of, hey, this is something that isn't okay. But there are massive companies that invest in the things that he does, and I believe in, don't quote me on this, but I think it's correct. I think it's BlackRock or maybe another massive asset manager did a lot of investing into his companies, and then they didn't acquire a lot of their crypto position yet at that point when he bought it, and it started shooting up. I can't say for certain, but I bet that there were some behind the scene, conversations about, hey, we didn't really buy our position yet. It's very high. Let's crash this market. And then that whole debacle of like, oh, it's destroying the environment. Like, he hasn't sold any of it. He understands that that wasn't the case, but it was in order to give them a better entry point for position. Because if you look at their filings with the SEC, they increased either their hard crypto asset holdings or their mining stock or stock in other companies that own Bitcoin by 300% from May to July of 2021. So they understand that the markets are irrational, but they're going to work in their favor because if you think that people won't have the stomach for stuff, they have the stomach for it. Could you imagine the amount of shit you can absorb if you have $10 trillion worth of assets managed? Like, barring a nuclear fallout, you really can weather just about any storm. It's just keeping people happy and pulling what levers you want. That's a lot of power to have economically. So when you have someone like Elon and he's trying to do these things that I think are for the betterment of people, working on different ways to automate driving, ways to.
Well, he's the way I look at it is very simple. This guy is a Twitter game pro. He's got some of the best Twitter game. We've seen it. Now there's a group of people that think he pumps and dumps, and he's pumping and dumping left and right. There's a group of people that are huge Elon fans. Whatever you think, this guy has some of the most viral tweets. He's also he's the richest, guy in the universe now, or one of the richest, if not the richest that we know of. And he has the ability to buy something that he's on every day. He loves tweeting. I think that he's like got one of the best Twitter games, whether it's because of his reputation or not, in the universe, because he knows what buttons to press to go extremely viral. And I think he's been doing that for a while. Even if you look back, he's been targeting the right subjects. He's been hip to pop culture. He's also got the humorous side. So I almost look at it as like a dream come true for him too, where like he might just want to own Twitter because he thinks he can make it better. Everything that he touches does turn to gold. He gets a lot of adversity for his either views or just, what markets he's tackling because of the competitors and what relationships those competitors have. So I think that, he gets a lot of adversity, but he hasn't broken. This guy is like had so many struggles with so big players, like major players, whether it's governmental or other companies, and he hasn't broke. I mean, guys like that, you almost can't like look at it and not be almost a little bit like impressed by. Personally.
I mean, I'm absolutely impressed by him. And regardless of market manipulation, it's hard when you're the wealthiest, most innovative person on the planet to not manipulate things.
Especially when you're funny.
Well, yeah, I mean, technically you're changing the way that everyone does things in multiple different avenues. You're manipulating stuff just by innovating in a way. So you're going to be controversial. And he said in his TED talk that he did when he was speaking about buying Twitter, where he was like, look, like the interviewer said, well, if anything goes wrong, people are going to blame you. He's like, people blame me for everything anyway. I'm not doing this for the profit. I'm doing it to protect freedom of speech, which I think people might find ironic if they don't really think about it too deeply, when they think that any type of insane rhetoric or things that it could occur on Twitter or be said, or the people that were banned. And I don't give a fuck about politics. I think politics are essentially just smoke and mirror show of a bunch of people that have a lot more power behind the scenes, pulling the strings and just telling people what to say. I don't think that it's for the good of anyone, and things have progressively gotten worse for multiple years, in multiple decades, technically. But here's the important thing, and I think he has a point. So if it became essentially what is now the de facto Times Square, or town square, that you would have back in the day, where people would have to stand up and share their thoughts and ideologies, and people could dispute them in full
Like Twitter today,
transparency.
it's
Well,
kind of like we get to do that like now, like a little bit, right? Like, but it should be almost more, because people do get, there's cancel culture and things of that nature that's
right.
like bigger than ever before right now, which is kind of
So,
suppressing total free thought, depending on your views and stuff.
well, here's takeaway, regardless of what your views are. So I think that, one, if you're committing a crime, or you're threatening like violence or things like that, if your laws in your countries prohibit things like that, regardless of where it is, he was like, those policies will still stand. But the way that I view it is, if you have something where, let's say, someone has a radical hate-filled idea, and you know that you and I and everyone else disagree with this, if that person shows up every day and screams into the void, and everyone just says you're out of your mind, or some people try and educate them, or they just get harassed by people like you, or obviously delusional in this thought process, and here's why. Over time, at least they're seeing like, okay, I'm really not making a point, and they just exhaust themselves. If you just ban them from the platform and they create their own website or their own forum, and everyone's coming there, you then have this confirmation bias, or an echo chamber with no contentious views, or no one telling them that that's incorrect.
I totally agree.
And things like that fester underground, and then eventually explode out the other end in a much more catastrophic way. So although you can't protect people in the sense of, you're going to hear, the world is a brutal and unforgiving place. And a lot of people that share their opinions on what should or shouldn't be said and how far to go, if they had any scope into maybe the 71% of people in the world that don't have internet, or any of the genocides that are currently occurring, or all the people that are suffering a lot more than we do, there are things that are far worse in this world than seeing a couple opinions or a couple offensive things you disagree with. Step up and have that conversation and tell them why. And everyone will back you up, because that is the consensus that it is wrong that we have come to. When you start to silence people or shut shit down, all they're going to do is then have no pushback at all. Wherever they're at, they now become essentially a genius, where everything they say is gold, and you just compound it from there. You can't do that.
Well, dude, you know what? Can I give a little bit of a peek behind the curtain? So when me and Viva first started this show, we were talking for 5 minutes, and he said something I totally agree with, which was, usually if you have a topic or a controversial discussion, the correct answer, I think you said, is somewhere, in the middle of all the different views. I would argue that there's always a lot of contexts that really matter, and those contexts make up these people's beliefs that conflict in the middle. But most people are rational and sensible based on their context. So I would argue that you're right. It is somewhere in the middle, but really what it is there's so many ways to look at things. There's so many contexts that, unless you understand how a rational person, if you believe most people are rational, if you believe that they can be, at least, are looking at something through their lens of context, through their filter, and deciphering it and making an opinion based on that, then you can understand why they believe what they believe, and that's fine.
You're correct. And when I say that there's things in the middle, that doesn't mean that there are no facts or falsehoods and everything's a blurred line. Even the things that we know are true, or like, let's say, okay, a decentralized system we believe would work, doesn't mean you can pull the plug on the normal system. We would have absolute pandemonium and everything would fall apart in a day. Like
I say
certain
that about
things,
DeFi a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
like certain things have to take time, and there always is a middle ground to how do we put these in place without completely debasing everyone else outside of them? How do we have conversations about viewpoints that were never
We
discovered? Like
we
these,
need we need
like,
an open speech platform to
oh,
discuss and debate. Charles Hoskinson says this all the time. He's like, listen, as soon as you kill free thought, what you're doing is you're destroying the potential for humanity.
it's true, but I would say even there isn't a single person that I
Or say
disagree
something.
with on, like, some of those big things, like the real big, like a lot of political lines are fought over it and everyone's always like, this has been an issue forever. A lot of people that have certain viewpoints, they didn't discover those viewpoints. Someone taught them that. And then whoever raised that person or influenced that person taught them that. It, like, we didn't all just come
Have
to
like a
be,
belief system based on how they were raised, what they were told,
yeah,
how they now see the world.
yeah.
Do you think that yeah, I agree.
Like it just comes down to a lot of the ideas that we have are not our own. That whole idea of open source idea, just like open source technology, where we can build on top of it, everything that we know has been a collective kind of wave since the dawn of time, just accruing all this information and passing it on. So the only way to get to some middle ground of peace, now that we don't have room to really expand, there isn't like, oh, like there's too many people here, not enough stuff, go somewhere else. Like we're pretty about as overextended as we can get in interconnectivity, supply chain, a lot of our governments and currencies. We need to come to some sort of collective idea that, okay, this is unsustainable, but we cannot put that on the backs of everyone globally. And it's a good segue actually into one thing I told you before we started recording that I wanted to ask you, that I
Yeah, let's segue.
personally, like I personally struggle a lot with this. And I'm curious to hear your take on it. So whether it's just me in this space or understanding more about the world than I technically should, because my backgrounds aren't always inherently in where I spend my time. It's just consuming a lot of information on every single side, trying to make the best intuitive decisions I can. Once you have that light bulb moment, or the people that have made it or are trying to make it, or we're shifting away from this old system, I was constantly getting like this heavy feeling of anxiety. And at first I thought it was anxiety in the sense of I need to try
Same.
and,
I know
like,
exactly. Yeah.
so there's two sides to it. So the one is I need to try and help as many people as I can while I can, before this whole thing becomes unobtainable for a lot of people, or they get priced out, or they just get completely debased by their current system because life's getting expensive, the debt is eating them alive, their job lets them go, they get replaced by an automated checkout counter. Like, how do I help as many people as possible? And then it also, then the other side of the coin is it quickly devolved into a pretty existential depression, realizing that for most people, we've already passed that point, because the average person, at least in the United States, doesn't have enough to pay for like a $400 expense. We're at an all-time high when it comes to consumer credit and consumer debt. Most people are maxed out on credit cards. Our unemployment numbers, although they reflect good, they're not really going into jobs that aren't having
It's
immense
a
turnover.
ticking time bomb.
So like I'm always somewhere in this balance of,
Mhm.
while trying to be positive, being anxious that I can't help people, or that sometimes you just feel like people, especially in your own life, they're not listening because they don't understand it. And also depressed because I understand that in the future, there's going to be certain hardships that come out of not paying attention to this stuff. And at that point, there's not going to be anything that you could do for them. And I think it compels us to be the best that we can when it comes to trying to educate people, but it doesn't go away or get easier as you go.
Yeah, no. This is I'm so passionate about this. So basically, Viva, what that makes me think of is we have a moment in history where the current system is collapsing and a new system is being built, played around with, and it's up for grabs for anyone to build the next system in many different ways. What I first and foremost wanted to say about this subject is there are some good things to it that we don't need to put on our shoulders. One thing is, in all of human history, we've never been able to, and I'll get back to what you were saying in a second, but this is a cool point, and I remind myself of this to stay pumped about Web3. We've never had the ability to take a small group, right, and play around with monetary policy. But now we do. Every DeFi protocol has its own monetary policy. Every NFT project has its own monetary policy. In all of history, that was like a very dangerous thing to play around with. You had one country, one government, they had to do a monetary policy. And guess what? There was too much on the line to test. So we've had limited data samples, but we've had to test them out on the masses, and we've had a lot of failures, and we haven't found one that works and is sustainable. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gone from gold to the fiat, and now we see the fiat, and now we're seeing inflation and all these different things. DeFi, cryptocurrency, we're now getting to test monetary policy at scale with little data samples. So that's a really cool thing in today's history that will sow a lot of results later on. What I think about though is me and you, man, we're kind of like the pilgrims out here, bro, because the reality is, like, Britain was taxing their citizens a lot. People decided to go onto a ship that was, obviously paid for by people that didn't want to take the risk of going on that ship themselves. But nonetheless, they got to go on this ship. They got to go to America. And then eventually you got colonies popping up. And then eventually you got the Revolutionary War here, where you had the Patriots first. So what I think about is those people that first landed here, right? And they're trying to build something new, not be taxed by Britain. So going back to the roots of being an American, really, is were we thinking at that time about all the people in Britain, right? It's like at some point we need to almost really focus on what we're building, because a lot of people are getting left behind and are getting taxed the hell out of. And now they're the ancestors of all of our friends that we talk to on Twitter Spaces from the UK. So I mean, it's just kind of funny that way. But
I love
that's one point of view that I like to just look at, because one thing that I've been getting a kick of is how kind of, and you feel this way too, I notice when you talk, you're very passionate about this. Some people don't realize this yet, but they probably will start, just like I started to recently. What's being built, take Cardano for an example, is absolutely a completely new nation. Like, imagine going out and building a brand new nation from ground up. I know it's not like a nation or a government. I'm not saying Cardano is going to be this government. All I'm saying is, like, we have this chance to build something really cool. And Charles Hoskinson knows he can't do it all himself. He doesn't want to. IOHK is going to slowly hand that over to the community. So what I guess our responsibility from being the ones that know isn't really a responsibility for everyone, because it's kind of a responsibility for ourselves too. Because if we kind of mess this up, if we look back, I look at regret, right? Gary Vee always says this. I don't want to be 90 and think back and be like, I probably could have pushed harder for decentralization. I probably could have pushed harder for some of the core values that Cardano had. I want to look back and be like, dude, I left everything on the field. I wasn't just taking, I was doing I do a sponsored show with Timmy, I make some money for my YouTube channel, but 90% of my content, 95% of my content is unsponsored. And I'm trying to educate, because after that little amount of money that I need to pay my rent for me and my wife, I don't want to be 90 and look back and be like, damn, Jcrypto, you could have tried a little bit harder, because guess what? Once this thing fails or succeeds, if it ever failed I don't think it would, first of all, because something else would get started from the open source code as long as that's still out there that Cardano has kind of created that another product could make and try again. Unless there's real, oppression, but I don't think we're going to go that way. Hopefully not. But I just want to know I left it all on the field myself and hopefully reach as much people as possible.
A couple things. One, that is probably the best framing device I've heard about the guilt and anxiety side of things. I'm going to start thinking of that too, because it's tough because there's so much,
We're on a ship, bro. We're on a ship ourselves. We got to put the oxygen mask on too, because the reality is, man, like we're trying to build something new that most people are still getting in Britain getting taxed. And we're trying to build something new. Not saying that we're avoiding taxes here with Cardano or crypto. I'm just saying like it's a chance to build a new framework for people that's not under the reason why people maybe left Britain, the oppression that they felt, the taxing, all the bad things of what we were taught, why America was kind of founded and built. That's kind of what we're trying to do with Web3. We're trying to take this old system and say, you know what, this can be improved. This can be better. Let's do our best to make this thing happen.
Yeah. And it's incredible framing of it. And I think that can help a little bit with the amount of responsibility or weight that you put on, or that I put on myself, because I tend to be my own harshest critic. And then the other thing is, if all of this failed, let's say just all of crypto, all of decentralization, and we go the other way, then like I can't imagine that any outcome is going to be something that I'm going to be too thrilled to participate in anyway. I've always been someone that when you say, you go,
I know, right, dude, that would suck.
I think
so
that
passionate about this stuff and this age and this innovation. If this goes away, man, I would just like, man, it would be tough.
Yeah, I think it would just be a dystopia. Like we would just have a infinite CBDC, and eventually it would just break down into complete collapse of most things, and we would have to find a new way to do stuff anyway. But when you say like you're going hard in the paint, this is something where I'm willing to die on this hill, one way or the other, metaphorically, or if it came down
When
to
did that
where,
light bulb?
like,
When did that light bulb go off for you?
I think it always has. Like although I always haven't been in this market, like I wasn't in here in 2009. I think that the person that I am, as far as I don't want anything, I've always disagreed with people that have a lack of accountability or take advantage of other people. I've always had a severe issue with how people that tend to have everything exploit other people for even more, and then blame them for not having enough, and then they just dig it in. It's always been like this uphill battle of ideology to prove that there's got to be something more.
Dude, can I give that story about my mentor? Because I want to give like the inverse, because I do feel like there's a little bit of like a 99%, 1% demonization too that I just don't think is true. So this is what I base my beliefs off of. There's good and bad in the world, but one of my mentors who was incredibly successful taught me this in real estate, and he made it. Like he just made it. He was very successful. He didn't come from a terrific amount of anything, but he made it and he worked his butt off. And the thing is, he told me that if you help enough people get what they want in life, you'll always be able to have whatever you want in life, and you'll be able to sleep at night. And I think that there are a tremendous amount of successful people that will 100% reach out and try to help those that are willing to kind of be either taught or just have some kind of hustle in them, that want more in life. And I do think that that's a healthy perspective for a lot of people trying to make it in this world, because it's not, even we demonize so many things, and I get it. It's government's not the best right now, but even lending, it wasn't a net, like the richest people right now, they got their families got there from lending, right? So if we look at the Rothschilds, when lending was first around, it wasn't a terrible thing. I mean, if you think about it, okay, you need money, here, I'll give you some, but when you're in a better position, just give me a little interest on that, and now I can like give that to you and feel good about it, right? It's not like an evil thing to lend somebody that needs money. It only became, then the government started to adopt this policy, and now our whole economy is built on debt. And it's actually not the best strategy for a government to run their monetary policy, we're finding. But what's interesting about it is like it didn't start off as a bad thing. And those people did rise and they got wealthy and whatnot. So I do think that there's a little bit of probably both being true. There's probably a lot of 1% that are just getting more and more, and the richer is getting richer, maybe because of the systems, not so much even the people sometimes too. And I think that's really where we're trying to rewire a little bit, is like the systems to make it, I don't even know. It's going to be interesting.
So two things. One, I do believe it is the system, it isn't the people, because even on a small scale as individuals, when we were talking about the opinions of each other that we might disagree with, they were brought up in a certain system or put in certain situations themselves, like that they had to adapt to. A lot of ultra wealthy people were at least wealthy to begin with. Like there are very few like $0 come up stories to multi-billionaire. I mean, there are a couple, but the majority of like middle like wealth, like a ton of millionaires and low
There's a
end
lot of
billionaires.
inheritance wealth. And then
Yeah.
there's a lot of millionaires that are like self-made, I would argue. I think I've seen the
Yeah.
stats. There's actually a good amount of like, but you're talking about the real wealth.
Yeah, I'm talking like decision-making wealth, that could affect the way that things go. A lot of that has been slushing around up there for a while and just kind of compounding like as we go. But ultimately, I don't inherently think people are good or bad. Every single person that was born, I'm not religious, but I assume that we're all blank slates and we become versions of what our environment makes us. So if you have a certain environment that makes you into an absolute insane billionaire megalomaniac, then that is just what those catalysts did to your brain that also runs off the same stimulus that mine does. I didn't have those certain catalysts or those factors in my life, so I didn't become that person and instead had to become who I am. But there was no hardwired uh, direction I had to go. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing was in that advice of what your mentor told you, I always say, like, do the right thing the right way, for the right reasons. Like, do the right thing, right way, right reasons, and you'll
What did
never
you
have to
say
worry.
yesterday? You said something cool yesterday. You said unintended or unintentional rewards.
Yeah,
I
it's
think that's true. That's true
so
because like when you're not expecting the rewards, sometimes they just kind of come from thin air. And I don't know, maybe that's the better way.
I think that for almost everything in my life, that's the way that they've come to me. And that includes traditional career success. Like, I didn't want the trophy, I didn't want the trips, I didn't even care about getting paid. All I cared about was doing a good job and showing up and holding myself accountable to what I was supposed to do. But by not screwing over people around me or lying to clients or trying to take any shortcuts, and by overdoing that, then benefits came from there. Everyone that went into every leadership training program, they weren't leaders. They didn't want to lead. They were managers. They just wanted the title or the raise or anything else. And a lot of the smartest people in any place I've ever been, work wise or just in personal life, that have the greatest ideas, the most practical outlooks, those individuals are overlooked for everything because they're not going to sit there and cram it down people's throats. They're just going to try and say, hey, like, here's the best way to do it. And we think this is right. It's never going to be the highest profit margin. It's never going to be the highest activity. You're never going to, be like, oh, this person's 500% a plan. I could probably say like that person is likely fraudulent or cheating the system because there are certain things that should not happen unless you're cutting corners or unless you're doing something different. But that's not how a lot of our systems are designed. We're designed to reward productivity, even if that productivity is backed by nothing. So if you do the right things for the right reasons, the right way, like, you'll never have to worry about anything. Like, if something went catastrophically wrong in my life, which, fingers crossed, like the last couple of months have been a little chaotic, but holding in there. But if something went absolutely sideways, I would assume that there were plenty of people, not only that I was there for throughout my life, or, you know, when they're sinking, pull them back up, or even in this space, that not obviously, like, no one's going to just come and pick you back up, but whether you need like emotional support, or you have a problem that you need to solve, or a lot of the times in ammonium, if we have something come up and we're like, hey, we need this one person to connect these two things, or we need someone with this skill set, everyone's there and can contribute in a way that you now have a safety net beyond one that is just a guaranteed, you know, savings account that you're just watching diminish over time. You have safety in community, you have safety in support of your ideas or your ability to voice them to people that actually care. You have a track record of maybe being second best in the country what you do, but you didn't screw people over to get it, and they'll work with you again. All of those things matter at the end of the day. I think if you're going to put your name on anything or come out here and speak to anyone,
Yeah.
um,
Dude,
and I mean,
dude, like to that point, I almost started to interrupt,
no,
man,
you're
but I
good.
just wanted to chime in too and say something. I almost think like a little bit of that law of attraction stuff, if you've ever seen that, is so true. Now, like, I'm not saying all of it's true. I just mean like what we believe almost is what kind of unfolds.
Yep.
So I do think that if we have faith in each other, if we do have faith, and we just on like, you ever just like go out into the world and just say like, just look for, I don't even know, opportunities to help, as weird as that sounds, even if it's not like, okay, if something crazy happens, you might not go and help. If a building's burning, right, you're not going to run in, but just like the mindset of like, okay, how can I help, how can I make this place a little bit better, it just feels good. I don't know like if it how to explain that, but also it goes back to that belief that my mentor instilled in me. I think it's strategical to think that way too, like, because then you're not expecting after helping one or two people something good to happen. Your mindset is like, okay, once I help maybe like 10,000 people, something good might happen. And it's like, dude, if you just like go out and educate and like make people feel good, even if you hit two people, chances are something good will happen, whether you get more views on your YouTube, whether more people are sharing you around, whether people are saying, hey man, I really valued this. And it's just like that belief keeps you going, because your expectation of helping 10,000 per one good thing to happen to you kind of keeps you motivated when things don't help, like when things don't come your way after, like, you keep helping, and then your expectations is like, okay, for every 10 million push-ups I do, I might get 1% stronger. Well, if you do 10 push-ups, you're going to get stronger, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's
Hey,
kind of interesting.
and you're right. I think to that point too. And then I have one more question for you before we end it, because I want people to watch the whole
Yeah,
thing, and
I'm
I don't want.
sorry. This
No,
was fun.
I should you not. I could talk to you all day, and I definitely want to do another one, just like a deeper dive on the space in general and different things.
Yeah.
But to that point of expecting good things to come, I would say that although I'm not religious, I found in a way that that sort of speaking it into existence or manifesting it, or I mean, shit, people talk about simulation theory and all this different stuff. Like, can you really force your own destiny? I mean, again, just like any other
No.
non-financial advice thing that we've talked about here, I can't say for certain, but what I do know is I do not want a future, no matter how extravagant, that I have to get in a way that doesn't line up with what I believe and who I am.
Mhm.
And there have been times where once all the gears finally did start clicking, and I wasn't just homeless and broke and just injured and stuck and in debt, and I'm making a ton of money in just corporate America, and I'm running through all these different things. It brings you no happiness or feeling of success, or at least it didn't bring me any. Like that, it's all just empty at the end of the day. And there have been a multitude of studies that have come out that says the absolute most depressed and stressed individuals, or upper level, like sort of upper tier, like middle management that makes 200 to $500,000 a year, are the most depressed, on the edge, going to jump people, because you would assume that all of that additional income makes you happy, but it doesn't. being able to feed yourself makes you happy. Being able to take care of your family makes you happy.
There's a
Being
certain
able,
level
yeah,
that once you get to, yeah, it's easier.
it's
But
like,
after that, it doesn't make you happier.
yeah,
That's
once
what
you
I've
get to
heard.
like,
I'm not there yet, but one day.
it's true. Once you get to, both in my life and just in the studies they've done, once you cross 70 grand a year, give or take, and I'm sure that that's up a little bit just due to inflation and just being able to do things, but roof over your head, food, health insurance, being able to take care of your family, education, childcare, whatever it might be. Once you do that, no, every other dollar you make beyond that point does not make you happier. What it does do is it often compounds the amount of stress that you have, because then you have all these assets and equities. You have all these different positions to watch. You have more responsibility and more decision-making weight to
And
whatever
more to
job,
lose.
more to lose. You're not really getting anything. And unless you are just an absolute bachelor car enthusiast and only cares about buying the newest 2022, whatever, you're going to have a very hollow, stressful existence chasing those things. But what does matter is taking care of people. I love coming on and getting excited with people that want to innovate. I like solving problems that can help other people. If by extension, I wound up buying a ton of, JPEGs and internet money with my friends, because I think that both ideologically and practically, it makes sense for the
Such a
people
weird
around
time
me,
in history.
then that is a unintentional benefit of, unintentional reward of doing the things that I believe are the right things to do. And there is no other way to get to success, in my opinion. So, I mean, I even realized, and I'm not even sure if I can edit it out, but like my name is on the video and shit. I didn't even switch it to Viva, but like, I'm not afraid of the shit that I do or speaking.
Oh, it won't come on the recording.
Oh, sweet. So sorry, guys, you can't track me down on other social medias, but like I've hit this point, like when I make these videos or put this
It
out,
says Tim Ferriss or something. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
something like that. It's not Jeff Bezos, I'll tell you that. But when it comes down to it, like I'm not afraid to put my name on this, or like when you have those doubts, and I'm sure like when you're feeling the anxieties or anyone questions you to get in here, or anyone watching this, when you go back and you decide like, okay, I do want to make something, or I do want to speak to this. We're not experts. You're not going to be like phenomenal at it to begin with. We all make mistakes. Odds are a lot of us at the end of the day are going to have more losses than wins, just collectively. Those wins might be 10 times bigger than the losses are, but you're going to have more small losses and missed bets and learning experiences and everything else as you go through it. But if you're here as an investor and it's something you believe in, don't be afraid to lean into that for the right reasons. And that's why I put my face and my words to the stuff that I do, because that is the hill I'm willing to die on. And I'll take all those risks and push myself to those limits and never sell out for any potential easy route, because it would essentially rob me of everything that I believe in. So like, I just wanted to make that point before I asked my last question. Then I wanted to wrap up just so that people watch the whole thing instead of doing a series, because I feel like I could talk to you for 10 hours straight and still keep going. But
There's a lot to talk about.
We could do this tomorrow and there would be a ton of other shit to talk about. So, I mean, you're not wrong, but I did want to close out with your, not so much best advice, because you gave a lot of good advice. I want your outlook in the future of Jcrypto and what you do in educating people. At what point is it like okay, I'm good, like we made it, Cardano's completed, we're at the last stage, governance is done, like I'm done? Is it going to have any different directions that you want to take it, not only from educational, but maybe not so much put together like these bullshit courses that people have, but like I've always thought about creating some type of just baseline educational guide that's like, hey, like if you're just off the street, here's a collection of all my videos and like all these different threads, and maybe I can bundle them together and just give them to you. or like you can share them with different people. I don't know what the legal parameters or, regulations are to like what you would have to hold yourself accountable to just to give them away. But I'm curious what your plans are as we go. What do you see for the ultimate future of Jcrypto?
Dude, so love you, Viva, for asking that. I honestly am gonna not do a course. I'm not gonna do a project. I might sponsor projects, there might be
Like a
sponsors.
VC, kind of. Like,
Well, more on just like small scale stuff, but
yeah.
like that's just me disclosing that. It's never gonna 95% of my content will be organic. The sponsors that I do have will all be disclosed. The only sponsored show I do right now is The Gauntlet with Timmy from Cardano Ecosystem News, but that's pretty much the main, revenue model. So let me get past that. Once I say that, let me just say, I think why I wouldn't do a course, why I wouldn't do a NFT project is I want to stay nimble right now, because what I really love is finding projects like Dead Pixels before anybody else. And it's interesting right now because part of me is still that investor inside of me that loves to just look and say, hey, you know what? I think this actually has a lot of potential. I think this is actually for these reasons, and here's why. And testing that through a period of time to see if I'm right or not, And I was very early to Dead Pixels. I talked about how the first Ethereum NFTs had some very big, surges of capital because they were just the first. I talked about the first interactive NFT for Dead Pixels. And I'm not saying that to say that I was correct. I'm just saying that because it made me feel really good to see that kind of unfold. I had an interview with the founder and I was just like, okay, once I had the interview with Adrian and I got to see what he's about, he's a really good founder. I was like, okay, this is going to do well no matter what, at least in the short to midterm, unless Cardano totally fails. So I think that's really my passion right now, is finding that stuff. I'll probably keep doing that. Long term though, I don't really know, because if I'm happier doing something else, I might go full into it. I have thought about BitBoy Crypto's model where he's like got this huge team of people, and that's interesting to me, but I wouldn't do it the way that he does it. I think BitBoy Crypto covers a lot of surface level stuff, and he's building out a team so that way he can go more in depth into stuff. And I respect that. That's a business that he's building. I would almost see a future of partnering with more content creators potentially after I do my time in the space and get better at certain fundamentals of being a YouTube creator. I really want to work on my storytelling capabilities. It's funny, my favorite podcasts right now are like the Nelk Boys, which is it's a little controversial right now because they've had some controversial guests, but I love those guys because I used to follow them when they would prank people. A lot of people don't know this about me. I love prank videos. Like, it's the worst because people get like, they put like lube on their hand and shake people's hands in the streets. I think that's hilarious. I know that somebody's a victim of it, but at the same time, they always go and tell them after, hey, you know what, you're on our show. Is it cool if we post it? And usually they're pretty cool. So I just, I love entertaining. I love those entertaining podcasts that have no educational value. I don't know. I wouldn't put it past myself to do that. I love Barstool for the same reason. They make sports funny. Dave Portnoy has been at it for so long. He's a Boston guy. I'm from Boston. So I just respect how he's grown his company. I really like this content game. When I'm so young though, that like I just don't know if it's going to be the rest of my life. I could do this till I'm 30 with just crypto and probably have a successful career, and I probably will. Maybe after that, I might get into something else with content just because it might be more fun or entertaining for people. But yeah, man, like there is something special, Viva, and like in that feeling too, not just the Dead Pixels and being kind of correct about where it goes, but in the education of a DEX, explaining what an automatic market maker is, explaining why this is going to be like the New York Stock Exchange one day when you have a regulated DEX, but everyone can provide their liquidity to it and earn passive income, opening people's eyes to the disruption that this stuff is bringing. It's so powerful and it's like empowering because you can do more with your assets than you ever could before. I do think stocks are the I think tokens like fungibles are the evolution of stocks. So yeah, man, it's really exciting. I don't know, Viva. Like there's so many ways that once I get to that point, like you're saying, where I'm making 70K a year off of just my YouTube stuff and I'm giving good content, I feel like I'm okay with that. You know, my wife she's going to law school. So like she's got debt, but if she gets into big law, that's not going to be something that I'll probably have to pay off. I mean, she'll be able to do that in a few years. And I hope she's happy. I always tell her, if you ever aren't happy, then you don't got to do it. You know, we'll figure it out. But she's taking a huge risk doing that. I'm taking a huge risk doing YouTube. And it's all for, like, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. She thinks she'll be happy doing what she's doing. So, and I don't see us having kids really soon. So I got this nice little time here to kind of experiment, play around. I love meeting people in the space though, man. Like how many cool people have we met in this space? Dude, when
Thousands.
Riley was talking the other day, man, that stuff is going to be like a historical moment for Cardano with the multi-sig wallets. Can you imagine how many people aren't even going to be projects using that stuff? Me and you could say, hey, let's buy a Pavia estate, but let's go 50-50 so we mitigate our risk and we could both have access to it. I mean, that's insane.
It's honestly, it is going to change the game. And I think that even with it, as excited as we are about that, I'm sure there's going to be something by next month that we're all like, holy shit. Like,
Dude,
oh,
that's
no,
why it's
there's
so
this thing.
fun to
Like
be in
it's
this
just going to
space.
keep going. Like it's nice to have all that potential too. And I think this is some of the hardest part
Our
for,
eyes, bro.
yeah, this is the hardest period for a lot of people because like I didn't make it through in one piece in the 2017 bull run. I had external problems where my W-2 got screwed up. I had old leftover student loans from my MBA that I went and they were keyed in wrong. So they pulled thousands of dollars, overdrafted my account, and I had to sell all my crypto at that point and lost a bunch of stuff. It was a nightmare. And by the time I finally got like my first paycheck on the other side of that I could spend, it was the literal top of the market. And then just got obliterated. And then, it had to build back up knowledge wise. And I think the pandemic hitting and all that crazy stuff was really like that moment
We've had a
where
few
what?
we've had a few knocks. A lot of people have had a few knocks to the chin. I think a lot of people in our space too.
Yeah.
Usually the people that rise to the top, they've been toppled to the bottom before once or twice.
Almost every single person. And the difference is like when we're looking at this now, you have probably the biggest group of people that are on the cusp of making it, or they're in the position to make it from start of 2020 until today. There are still enough retail individuals in this market that if it goes parabolic like it did multiple times in the past, you're going to have by orders of magnitude more people that are going to make it than did in all the previous bull runs combined. Now, the only difference is we're not relying on retail because now we're in the trillions of market cap. We're relying on industry and we're relying on banking and we're relying on government. They are not going to allow this to be easy. They are not going to allow all of retail to make it. It's just they're not going to do it. So in the interim, like as things get difficult currently, and I'm sure a lot of people are like, oh my God, Cardano's 96 cents again. It was under 10 cents for like an extended period of time. It's okay.
There's
It is just,
always, Aviva, there's always opportunity for entrepreneurs and investors.
yeah,
Any
like
market.
always. So if you're feeling ever like overwhelmed or you're looking at this,
This isn't the one moment for you, like for anybody that's watching, right? It's like there's going to be other moments.
there will be, but like for all the people that are primed and in those positions right now, this is how can we exhaust as many people out of the market as possible? How can we take this opportunity and put it in our balance sheets? How can we eliminate retail from that? And that's where, like, that guy went viral through the crypto community where he did his Wyckoff chart breakdown. He was like, this is a very old traditional, like, old money market movement that is
Hmm?
absolutely designed to just exhaust people. Like,
Absolutely.
it's meant to psychologically break people, make them lose as much in that chop, and then just scare them out and capitulate them right in your pocket. So, like,
1000%. With
as we go,
inflation, with all these other things happening, it's mental, psychological
yep,
warfare right now that we're in.
it is.
And it's, but again, like, it's it's tough for me to look at this, and going back to our conversation of, is the summit just to become a millionaire, or is the summit to learn as much as possible, and then you're wealthy for life because of all that knowledge that you have and all the experiences that you have, and to make that, maybe 70K a year kind of deal, but like, to be in this space, to be in it, and for all the other things that it will create, all the other opportunities that will create, it's like there's a little bit of um pick your poison type of deal here. Because if you're just going for that one shot to be a millionaire, yeah, it's going to be tough, and don't over leverage yourself because you might get exhausted, I think, is your point, right?
And a lot of people will, because they'll either be desperate or they're working with the average $400 in savings that people have. Like, you can't compound that unless you get incredibly lucky. And if you want to do that, go to the casino and put everything on your favorite number on roulette. But the last thing I'll say is, the summit is just like everyone else's thought process, or what typically tends to be where we want to wind up, is directly in the middle. And that is to live an affordable, sustainable, safe life across the world. That right now you have a very small fraction of people that have unlimited, essentially, amount of power and resources and leverage over the majority. You got 1.4 billion people that are unbanked and don't even have financial services. You got 71% of the people on the planet that have no mesh network, no Wi-Fi, no internet access. You have multiple authoritarian governments that are creating either genocides or human atrocities and imposing those things upon populations. I don't believe that any one population or any one outlook is incorrect. I believe everyone at the end of the day wants to live a safe, affordable, sustainable life. That's
Mhm.
the summit. I would trade being a billionaire today for everyone being able to live a sustainable life. Like that, because then I have a safe, affordable, sustainable life as well. And no amount of money beyond that will help anything. Being a billionaire when everything is chaotic and you can pay off everyone's debt and do all this stuff, like, yeah, that'd be cool. But if everything works status quo, I'm not afraid of work. I'm not afraid of showing up, and I'll dig ditches the rest of my life if I can just be okay. It's just we don't have the opportunity to exist like that, and a lot of people never have. So
Like, for like the majority of people watching this on their computers, going back to kind of the point earlier, where there's that, we're early in this space, there's so many people that don't know about it, there's enormous opportunity. And do you think that, like, because personally, man, I think that part of it is definitely people's, like, we're getting into kind of, self-help right now. Because I think part of it is either not having the urge or desire to kind of learn, or curiosity, or kind of still believing the narrative that, only it's impossible to become wealthy, right? It's impossible to become rich. You know how, like, there's that kind of narrative. But like, when we're here talking, man, like me and you, we consume so much information. We try to learn about this stuff. We try to learn about investing. We try to learn about these trends. We try to learn about the market manipulation. So that way we're better prepared inside of these environments to come out, with making some gains, or making some kind of benefiting our families, or benefiting our own personal well-being. I think that there's a lot to be said for things like positivity, things like building in good habits in your life that just really hits the mainstream who probably isn't watching this video, right? Because like there's obviously the people that can't even get internet access that to watch this. That's a tough place to be. But then there's a ton of unhappiness in the middle of like people that want to learn and educating themselves to improve their life, and people that can't even have that opportunity. Then there's all these people in the middle that just that have the chance to learn and do that, but just aren't there mentally, or aren't happy enough mentally, or curious enough mentally to even take those steps.
Yeah. And it's as simple as I saw more people in my personal life or on my personal social medias that I'm rarely on anymore because it's just a bunch of negativity and exhaustive conversation, fighting back and forth about nothing at all. I saw more people complain about the price of groceries or rent increasing than I did see anyone talk about any opportunities in crypto or trying to build something or trying to better themselves. And every single one of those individuals, or at least a lot of them, I would just ask, did you get a stimulus check when we shut everything down? Not talking about the policy, was it right or wrong? Did we quarantine correctly? I fuck the politics. Did you get a stimulus check? Yes or no? And if they did, I would say, I'm sure that when you got that, you're like, okay, this is great. And you used it to either pay off some credit debt, or you paid some bills, or you bought a new pair of shoes. Whatever people did with it, they spent it. And our consumer debt actually dropped down significantly when we gave those out. That $1,200 that you received, you now owe in everything that you buy. And that is collectively, and that is without unforeseen or unprepared problems that are stemming from the people that produce a combined 50% of the wheat and grain in the world, or 90%.
Without wage increases. So they owe a premium on
Yeah.
top of what they were given.
Yeah. So that, to tie it all together when it comes to education and the people that do not want to learn, they're going to have to. It's just going to be too late to do anything more than just scrape by. And at the end of the day, I kind of used it almost like an addiction sort of example, because I've had plenty of friends and family that have either struggled with addiction or dealt with stuff like that. And a lot of times people don't address something until it becomes, you are at rock bottom. Like the pleasure.
That's when you find out who you are.
Yeah. And the pleasure you get from something is finally outweighed by the pain that you feel. In a lot of this market, that's where that adaptation is going to come. It's going to be, people are going to feel enough pain in their own life or struggle enough to where it is unsustainable. And then they're going to say, okay, I'm in. And JP Morgan's going to say, here's your $100 worth of crumbs of Satoshis, and you owe us 17.25%, and have a nice day. So, at the end of the day, what you do is incredible. I appreciate the absolute hell out of you. And thanks for jumping on. It was a longer video, but I mean it when I say that I could talk to you for 10 hours.
Dude, this is good, man. I really enjoyed it. And I hope people get something out of it, because most of what we talked about, I think me and Viva have very similar views, and we were giving a little bit of different perspectives on the same issues at some points, but I think it's important, man. Like, it's important for people to, like, I feel like it's tied to that. And I'll say this, man, like, I feel like that moment when you recognize that you're like a pilgrim in this Cardano, and you're like, oh shit, I got to actually build this thing or do my best so that way I don't regret it when I'm dead and think, oh man, we were all so lazy and we didn't recognize that opportunity that, Charles and IOHK kind of presented with us. And we didn't really take that by the balls and just like try to make something good out of it. I think it's connected to that rock bottom moment, right? When you're like, oh shit, like things are going in such a bad direction from the way that the people in power have managed things for the people's benefit, I'll say, or detriment, really. It's like you notice that we're now having this opportunity. So the very few of us that see it and are like, okay, this is actually something that could change this entire system that we're in and make it better for all of us, rather than just being one out of 99 people that consistently looks for the best opportunities in a downturn or a negative, era for humanity. Because me and you, we might be able to make it in a downturn. We might be able to make it in a negative part of history because, and people watching too, because we're information seekers. But most people will be just hit out of nowhere from it because we've had such a cush environment. So if there's anything that this hopefully does, it's, well, actually, I'll just speak for myself. Maybe people wake up a little bit, maybe that's a good thing, no pressure though. I don't like putting pressure on people because everyone has different responsibilities, but it definitely affirms in my own sense that like, yeah, this is an important time in history, and what Cardano's striving to do and all of these other third world nations that Cardano's participating in, even for the middle class of the middle class people who are struggling in America that Cardano's trying to impact and help. It's a powerful moment in history. So we got to kind of recognize that and hopefully just do our best, because that's all we can do.
Yeah. And I completely agree. And I think my closing add to that is just, if the world is the Titanic, then we can't just be the band trying to keep everyone positive. It's going to take a lot of people to turn that boat around before it hits, because regardless of them getting paid to perform and play until the very end, they were still on that boat. So if everything around us and that whole Jenga tower falls and the whole ship sinks, it's not going to, we could be as successful as possible. I don't want to be successful in a bunker. I don't want to be successful and watch all my friends and family lose everything. Like, that isn't success to me either. So I think that a lot of this is just a collective effort that I believe will continue to compound and we'll get it right. But that's, you hit the nail on the head. Like, it's
a wake up call.
Yeah.
For me too. Even talking with you, I'm like, dude, this is like an important, I'm about to sound like, oh yeah, crypto, it's going to change the world. But like, it's kind of an important moment in history. And we have, for the first time, support of major companies, like Snoop Dogg coming to Cardano. Like, come on, like Snoop Dogg is going to protect Cardano's NFTs now because he has capital to do it. We kind of have the backing of some people that believe in some of the same stuff that we believe, who have power. It's a good tailwind to do some damage here and to create some good change.
Yeah. And hey, people like you lead the way. So I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you so much for, your time today. And I'd love to do this again. I hope that people take a lot of good away from this. And it was an absolute blast, man.
Hey, let's if you guys want to see me again on the show, just let us know in the comments. If you don't, just don't say anything. But if you do, let us know in the comments and I'll come on again for sure.
There you go. Oh, and the recording, and ultimately we'll go from there. But no, thank you so much, brother.
Absolutely, man.